Mark slid the printed email across the glass table like it was a death sentence. The conference room felt smaller than usual, the fluorescent lights buzzing too loud in my ears. Helen from HR sat stiff on one side, her face carefully blank. Mark sat on the other, arms folded across his chest, staring at me like I'd burned the building down. At the bottom of the email was a digital signature authorizing a client data transfer that clearly violated company policy. Name, my job title, and a timestamp that supposedly proved I'd approved it. Only problem was, I knew with a cold, dizzy certainty that I had never sent that email. Helen cleared her throat and said the words slowly, like she was reading from a script. Kelly, this is a serious policy breach. We're considering termination for cause. Mark didn't look at me. He looked at the wall, too calm, too rehearsed. My face burned. My palms went slick. Every year I'd spent building a reputation as the reliable one, the ethical one, was being peeled away in front of strangers. I tried to steady my voice, but it came out shaky anyway. This isn't mine. I never sent this email. Helen glanced at Mark, then back at me. IT confirmed it came from your account, Kelly. Mark finally looked at me then, tilting his head with this pitying, practiced expression. I'm disappointed, Kelly. I really thought you understood how important compliance was to us. The humiliation shifted into something else. Something icy and sharp. I looked down at the printed email again, forcing myself to focus through the panic. My eyes caught on the signature line at the bottom. Something about it felt wrong. The spacing was off. The punctuation didn't match how I usually sign my emails. I'd seen this signature before, but not on my emails. It was on his. The thought hit me like a slap, and I looked up at Mark. He was already looking away, checking his watch like this meeting was just another task on his list. I walked back to my desk in a daze, pulse thudding in my ears. People glanced at me, then quickly looked away. News traveled fast in small offices. I sat down, staring at my computer screen without seeing it, replaying the meeting over and over in my head. And that's when the title of my story wrote itself in my mind, clear as day. My boss claimed I breached policy. My email thread proved it was his signature, not mine. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my revenge story from. I want to know how far it has traveled. My name is Kelly Adams. I'm 29 years old, a white woman from Ohio, now living in Denver. I work as an account coordinator at a mid-sized software company that sells compliance tools, which is ironic considering what just happened. A year ago, I actually admired Mark. I thought he was tough but fair. I stayed late, fixed his mistakes, covered for him when he double-booked meetings. I thought the constant pressure was just the price of paying my dues. I thought it meant he believed in me. I was so wrong. Flashback to 8 months earlier. I was still at my desk at 7:30 on a Thursday night, finishing up client dashboards that should have been Mark's responsibility. He stood in my doorway, coffee cup in hand, smiling that easy smile that made you feel like you were part of something important. Kelly, you're a lifesaver. Seriously. You've got that ownership mentality we need around here. I soaked it in like sunlight. Every compliment felt like progress, like proof I was moving up. He'd forward me messages with subject lines like, "Can you just fix this?" And I would. Then he'd present the fixed version in meetings, taking credit while I sat in the back, telling myself it didn't matter. The work mattered. Being reliable mattered. Back then I thought pressure meant he believed in me. I didn't see the red flags waving right in front of my face. I didn't see that he was building me up just to use me as a shield. 2 months before the firing meeting, Mark pushed me to bend a policy for the first time. We were in his office, reviewing a client's data access request. "Just grant them temporary access," he said, waving his hand like it was nothing. "No one's going to audit a small account like this." I frowned, pulling up the policy on my laptop. "Mark, the policy says we need written approval from their compliance officer first. We can't just grant access because they asked nicely." He sighed, leaning back in his chair. "You're by the book to a fault, Kelly. Sometimes you have to be flexible." Compromised. I adjusted the timeline, kept it technically compliant, and documented everything. Mark smiled too easily when I told him it was done. That was the first time he realized I knew the rules better than he did. And instead of respecting that, it made me dangerous to him. I just didn't know it yet. Then came the big fish client. A hospital system with strict data regulations and a contract worth more than half our annual revenue. Mark called an all-hands meeting, standing at the front of the conference room like a general rallying troops. This project is our ticket to the next level. If we land this, we're talking promotions, bonuses, maybe even expansion. He looked right at me when he said the next part. Operations needs to be flawless. If this goes south, it's on the people handling the day-to-day. Meaning me. Suddenly, Mark was hovering over my shoulder constantly, obsessing over deadlines, demanding updates on approvals I hadn't even processed yet. One afternoon, he leaned over my desk and said quietly, "I'll handle the approvals. You just make it look clean." I frowned at the phrasing, but I didn't push back. I should have. That sentence should have set off alarms in my head. But I was too busy trying to keep up. A few weeks later, I was buried in emails when I noticed a thread Mark had accidentally CC'd me on. It was between him and Trevor, one of our sales reps. Trevor was asking about approval timelines for the hospital client. Mark's response was casual, almost careless. "Don't worry, I'll take care of all approvals. Just make sure Kelly signs off somehow." I stared at that line for a second, then moved on. I had 20 other emails to answer and a meeting in 10 minutes. It didn't register as important. Present-day me wants to reach back through time and shake myself. That line was sitting in my inbox the whole time, waiting to save me. It was proof, written in his own words, that he planned to forge my approval. But I didn't see it. Not until it was almost too late. I filed the email away and forgot about it. Biggest mistake I could have made. As the deadline for the hospital project got closer, Mark got harsher. "Everyone else finds a way," he snapped one afternoon when I flagged a compliance issue. "You keep finding rules." He started CCing other managers when he criticized me, making sure everyone saw that I was the one slowing things down. I started apologizing for things that weren't my fault. I stopped pushing back as hard. I wanted to keep the peace, to prove I was a team player. One morning he called me into his office and closed the door. "Kelly, I need you to understand something. This company values people who solve problems, not people who create them." I felt my stomach drop. "I'm just trying to follow policy, Mark." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I know. But maybe it's time to ask yourself if you're being a roadblock." That's when the seed was planted. The idea that I might be difficult. That I might be the problem. The night the breach supposedly happened, I left work early for once. It was my sister's birthday, and I'd promised I wouldn't miss dinner. I shut down my laptop at 6:15, logged out of my email on my phone, and headed to the restaurant across town. I remember it clearly because I took a photo of my sister blowing out candles and posted it to our family group chat, joking about finally having a life outside work. The timestamp on that photo was 6:42. Present-day me pulls up that photo now, staring at the timestamp like it's a lifeline. Because according to the email Mark showed me in that HR meeting, the policy breach email was sent from my account at 6:55. While I was at that restaurant, blowing out candles and laughing with my family, someone was using my account to authorize an unauthorized data transfer. And I knew exactly who. Back in the present, sitting at my desk after the HR meeting, I pulled up my work calendar. There was a meeting listed 2 days before the supposed breach. Follow-up. Data access clarification. I didn't remember attending that meeting. I clicked on the invite. I wasn't listed as required. I was marked as optional. But the notes from the meeting referenced my verbal approval for the data transfer. I never gave verbal approval. I was never in that meeting. Mark had created a paper trail suggesting I was in the loop on everything, that I'd been involved in decisions I'd never even heard about. He'd been laying groundwork for this, planning it, building a case against me in case something went wrong. And when it did go wrong, when the client's data got flagged in an audit, he had a perfect scapegoat ready. Me. The reliable one. The one who'd never fight back. I walked to the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and let the panic rise. My hands shook. My breath came too fast. For about 30 seconds I let myself feel everything. The betrayal. The fear. The humiliation. Then I pushed it down, slowly, deliberately. If I cried, I lost. If I raged, I lost. If I quit, I definitely lost. I washed my face in the sink, staring at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red, but my jaw was set. I made a decision right there. I was going to treat this like one of the client audits I handled every day. Gather facts. Build a timeline. Find the proof. I wasn't going to let Mark rewrite my story. I dried my hands, straightened my shirt, and walked back to my desk. Time to go to work. This time for myself. After everyone left for the day, I stayed behind. The office was quiet. Just the hum of computers and the distant sound of the cleaning crew on another floor. I opened my email and started downloading everything. Every thread related to the hospital client. Every approval request. Every meeting invite. I created folders, color-coded them, built my own evidence map. I found the email where Mark told Trevor he'd take care of the approvals, and just make sure Kelly signs off somehow. I highlighted it, saved it, forwarded it to my personal email. Then I opened the printed breach email I'd taken from the conference room. I stared at it for a long time, comparing it to my real emails. And that's when I saw it. The tiny differences. The spacing was wrong. The punctuation didn't match. My real signature said, Account Coordinator. The fake one said, Accounts Coordinator. Plural. A small typo, but not one I'd ever make. Mark didn't know me well enough to forge me right. The next morning I approached Jeremy in IT. He was a quiet guy, kept to himself, but I'd helped him once when he was drowning in a compliance audit. He owed me, and more importantly, he hated liars. Jeremy, can I ask you a hypothetical? Kept my voice low, casual. He looked up from his screen, curious. Sure. If someone sent an email from my account, but it wasn't actually me, would there be a way to tell? His expression shifted. You mean like a spoofed email? Or someone logging into my account from a different device? He was quiet for a moment, studying me. Is this hypothetical, Kelly? I hesitated, then shook my head. No. He closed his laptop. Come with me. We went to a small office in the back, away from everyone else. He pulled up the email logs, typing quickly. If someone used your account on a different device, I'll see it. Give me the date and time. I did. He worked in silence for a few minutes. Then he stopped, staring at the screen. Kelly, this email didn't come from your laptop. My heart pounded. Where did it come from? Jeremy turned the screen toward me. This IP address is assigned to Mark's office workstation. I stared at the screen, at the proof laid out in lines of code and timestamps. Jeremy wasn't just curious anymore. He was angry. He logged into your account from his computer? I don't know how, but yeah. Looks like it. Jeremy shook his head, already printing the logs. Kelly, if he's willing to do this, he's not going to stop on his own. You need to report this. I took the printed pages, hands shaking slightly. Can I get a copy of everything? The full metadata, the routing information, all of it. He nodded. I'll put it on a flash drive. Off the record. He handed it to me a few minutes later. Be careful. Guys like him don't go down easy. I walked back to my desk, clutching the flash drive like it was made of gold. Finally had proof. Real, undeniable proof that the email didn't come from me. Now I just had to figure out what to do with it. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of water and the company handbook open on my laptop. I'd never read the whistleblower policy before. I'd never needed to. But now I read it like it was scripture. Employees may report suspected violations of policy directly to the external compliance hotline without fear of retaliation. Reports may be made anonymously and will be investigated independently of internal management. I felt something shift inside me. Could bypass Mark. Could bypass HR. I could go straight to the external compliance firm the company hired for audits, and they were legally required to investigate. I opened a blank document and started drafting a report. Chronological, factual, unemotional, just the facts backed by evidence. I worked until 2 in the morning, inserting screenshots, attaching emails, including Jeremy's metadata printouts. I added the detail about being at my sister's birthday dinner when the email was supposedly sent, complete with photo timestamps and witnesses. Each piece felt like a brick in a wall between me and Mark's lies. I saved the document as unauthorized approval pattern, internal report. Then I went to bed, more exhausted than I'd ever been, but also strangely calm. The next morning I requested a follow-up meeting with HR. Not with Mark present, just me and Helen. She looked surprised when I walked in holding a folder, my expression steady. I have new information about the policy breach accusation. I slid the folder across the table. I'd like you to review this before we proceed with any termination. Helen opened the folder slowly, her eyes scanning the first page, then the second. Her face tightened. I could see her trying to maintain neutrality, but it was slipping. When she got to the metadata logs, she stopped reading and looked up at me. Where did you get this? ID. The email that supposedly came from my account was sent from Mark's workstation. I've never accessed my email from his computer. I was off-site when it was sent, and I have witnesses. Helen closed the folder, her hands resting on top of it like she was trying to decide what to do. We'll need time to review this. Her voice was shaky. I leaned forward slightly. Are you required to notify our external compliance partner about suspected fraud? The silence that followed was deafening. While I waited, I quietly reached out to 2 colleagues I trusted. I didn't tell them everything, just enough to see if they'd had similar experiences. The first was Simone, a project manager who'd left the company 6 months ago. We met for coffee. Did Mark ever blame you for something you didn't do? I asked carefully. Her expression darkened. Last year, there was an approval I supposedly gave for a budget overrun. I got written up for it. But I didn't remember approving anything. She stirred her coffee. HR told me the system doesn't lie. I took the write-up and moved on because I couldn't prove anything. My stomach dropped. Did you ever see the approval email? She shook her head. They just showed me the signature line. It looked like mine, so I figured maybe I'd been too busy and forgot. I thanked her and left, my mind racing. The second colleague, Adam, admitted he'd seen Mark editing forwarded emails before sending them on. He'd changed the wording to make it sound like someone else had approved something. I always thought it was weird, but I never said anything. I realized then that I might not be Mark's first scapegoat. He'd built his whole career on forged signatures and shifting blame. And nobody had caught him until now. A week later, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. It was from the external compliance firm. They were requesting a confidential interview. HR had escalated my report. I met with the auditor, a woman named Patricia, in a small office downtown. She was professional, calm, and thorough. I walked her through everything. Timeline, the metadata, the emails, the pattern of blame shifting. When I showed her the email where Mark promised to take care of the approvals and just make sure Kelly signs off somehow, her expression changed. She stopped taking notes and looked at me directly. Kelly, this may be bigger than you realize. If he's done this to multiple employees, we're looking at a pattern of fraud. He paused. Are you willing to provide a formal statement? He nodded. Yes, but I want it on record that I did my job. Followed policy. I tried to protect this company, and he used that against me. Patricia wrote that down word for word. Thank you, Kelly. We'll be in touch. I walked out of that office feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Back at work, Mark's calm facade started to crack. He began dropping by my desk uninvited, making passive-aggressive comments. How are you holding up, Kelly? I know this must be hard for you. He'd ask for updates on projects he'd never cared about before, trying to reassert dominance. One afternoon, I overheard him in a conference room, his voice raised. He was talking to Helen from HR. "IT must have mixed something up. I don't know what Kelly's trying to pull here, but this is ridiculous." I stood outside the door listening. Helen's response was quieter, but I caught the edge in her tone. "Mark, the external auditors have questions. This isn't going away." When Mark came out, he saw me standing there. For a moment, something flashed across his face. Fear. Then he smiled tightly and walked past me without a word. I went back to my desk, hands steady. He knew. He knew the investigation wasn't going his way. And he was panicking. 2 weeks after my meeting with Patricia, I was called into another conference room. This time it wasn't just Helen. Patricia was there. So was Helen. And so was Mark. The room felt tense, like everyone was holding their breath. Patricia started asking Mark questions about the approval process for the hospital client. He answered smoothly at first, his voice confident. "I delegated approvals to my team. Kelly was responsible for ensuring compliance on her end." Patricia nodded, writing notes. Then she looked up. "So you didn't directly handle any approvals for that client?" Mark shook his head. "No. That was Kelly's responsibility." Patricia pulled out a printed email. Mark's email. She read it aloud slowly and clearly. "I'll take care of all approvals. Just make sure Kelly signs off somehow." The room went silent. Mark's face went pale. "That's not. I didn't mean it like that. That was just casual conversation." Patricia leaned forward. "This meeting is being recorded, Mr. Harrison. Would you like to revise your previous statement?" Mark stammered, but nothing coherent came out. I sat perfectly still, watching him unravel. A week later, I was called into another meeting. Just me, Helen, Patricia, and a senior executive I'd only seen in company-wide emails. His name was Vincent, and he was the regional director. "Kelly, we want to thank you for your cooperation during this investigation," Vincent said, his tone serious. Patricia picked up where he left off. "We've uncovered multiple instances of unauthorized approvals traced back to Mark's workstation, including 2 cases where other employees were written up for violations they didn't commit." I felt a wave of vindication, but also sadness for Simone and the others who'd been blamed before me. Vincent folded his hands on the table. "We're terminating Mark's employment, effective immediately. And we're expunging your record completely. There will be no policy breach on your file." He paused. "We'd also like to offer you a settlement for the distress this caused, along with a formal letter acknowledging that you acted with integrity throughout." I took a breath, steadying myself. I wanted in writing that I upheld company policy under pressure. "And I want an apology." Vincent nodded. "Done." 2 days later, the company sent an internal email. "Mark Harrison is no longer with the organization. We thank him for his service and wish him well in his future endeavors." But the whispers said more. People knew he'd been fired. They knew why. And slowly, the truth spread through the office like wildfire. I walked through the halls and people looked at me differently. Not with pity anymore. With respect. Helen from HR pulled me aside one afternoon. "Kelly, I want to apologize. We should have investigated your claims immediately instead of assuming the system was right." He nodded. "Thank you." She hesitated. "For what it's worth, you were braver than most people would have been." I didn't feel brave. I felt exhausted. But I also felt free. The weight I'd been carrying for months, the constant fear and humiliation, was finally gone. I went back to my desk, opened my laptop and got back to work. On my terms this time. A month after Mark's termination, I received an offer from a smaller company across town. They specialized in compliance software for healthcare systems, and they'd heard about my case through industry contacts. The hiring manager was upfront during my interview. "We need someone who actually understands compliance, not just someone who talks about it. Your reputation precedes you." I accepted the offer. My last day at the old company was quiet. I packed up my desk, said goodbye to a few colleagues, and walked out without looking back. My new office was smaller, brighter, and filled with people who actually listened when I flagged a policy concern. My new manager, a woman named Brenda, thanked me during my first week for catching a small inconsistency in a contract. She genuinely meant it. No sarcasm. No resentment. Just appreciation. I realized this was what respect felt like. It had been so long, I'd almost forgotten. 3 months into my new job, I received an email from Simone, my former colleague who'd been written up for the budget overrun she never approved. "Kelly, I wanted to let you know that after your case, the company reviewed all questionable write-ups from the past 2 years. They cleared me and 2 other people. We got formal apologies and our records expunged. Thank you for standing up. You saved more than just yourself." I read that email twice, then closed my laptop and stepped outside into the sun. The air was crisp, the sky clear. I thought about Mark, wherever he was now, probably blaming everyone but himself for what happened. I didn't feel anger anymore. Just a quiet, steady certainty that I'd done the right thing. Not just for me but for everyone he'd hurt before me. And everyone he might have hurt in the future. I didn't destroy him with gossip or rage. I just let his own arrogance meet the right evidence. And that was enough. Looking back now, I see the whole story clearly. The manipulation. The red flags I ignored. The moment I finally decided to stop being afraid and start fighting back. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd take down my boss with an email thread and metadata logs, I wouldn't have believed them. I would have said I wasn't brave enough. But bravery isn't fearless. Bravery is being terrified and doing it anyway. I learned something important through all of this. Document everything. Know your worth. And never let someone rewrite your signature or your story for their convenience. Because the truth has a way of coming out, as long as you're willing to dig for it. Mark thought he could erase me, blame me, and move on like nothing happened. But he forgot one thing. I knew the rules better than he did. And I wasn't afraid to use them. My name is Kelly Adams. And this is the story of how I proved that my boss's signature was never mine. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in such a situation? Please share below and subscribe to this channel for more stories like mine.